Hey, boys and girls. This is lesson 22, chapter 22, day 3. We're going to continue working with the theological virtues, recapping what we've already talked about. The theological virtues are very good habits that God gave us: faith, hope, and love. These habits were given to us by God to improve our relationship. Yesterday, we had talked about the Beatitudes, and the Beatitudes were these good behaviors, these good things that come out of those who were needy. We talked about the Beatitudes being very important teachings of Jesus, and they begin with the word blessed, and blessed means happy. We talked about that yesterday. That was the theological virtue of hope. Today, we're going to talk about the theological virtue of love. I'm going to highlight what we need to highlight and go over some of the information so it makes sense, and we should be all set. Here we go. I'm going to start reading where it says, "We believe," on page 252, and I'll highlight it as we go on. Let me get to my little highlighting tool. Here we go. "We believe all love comes from God. Out of his great love, God first created humans. Then, because of his love, God sent his son to save all people. God sent his son so that all people everywhere could share in God's life and love more fully." So everything that comes out of this is love. Love is the root, the start, the beginning of everything. The love that God had from the earth for the earth, the love that God had for the people, and the love that Jesus had for everybody. Next paragraph. During his ministry, Jesus taught the people about many things. He explained God's law and the way to live. He talked about the meaning of the Ten Commandments. He offered the Beatitudes as a model for living and working towards future happiness. I'm going to highlight that. I think that's very important. The Beatitudes were a guide that Jesus gave us to talk about future happiness, what we can do to be happy later on in life, not just now. Let's continue reading. By doing these things, Jesus showed the people that God's law is a law of love. Let's keep reading. Once Jesus was asked what commandment of God's law was the greatest. Jesus responded by saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment." I am going to highlight that. That is a very, very, very important section. These commandments aren't part of the 10 Commandments. These are what we call the new commandments. The 10 Commandments were given to Moses by God in the Old Testament. Jesus is part of the New Testament. So Jesus took all those 10 commandments and he summed them up into two, this one being the first. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the greatest and first of all commandments. But then he continued, the second like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that's exactly what we should be doing. These are the two new commandments that Jesus gave us. After the Sermon on the Mount, he continued his teaching, he continued his practice, his preaching, and he gave us these two new commandments. Let's continue reading. Love is possible because God loves us first. God's love for us never ends. He is always there for us, especially through the church community. The virtue of love enables us to love God and to love our neighbor. I'm going to highlight that. Because we have that virtue of love, we are able to love God and love our neighbor, remembering that that is a choice. Virtues are not things that we just do. They are choices that we make that become a habit over time. Love is the greatest of all virtues. All the other virtues come from it and lead back to it. Love is the goal of our lives as Christians. Love is the goal of our lives as Christians. Our goal is to love. Love as God loved Jesus, God love as Jesus loved us, and love as we should love others. Let's keep reading. Jesus showed us how to love like no one else could. Before he died, Jesus told his disciples, I give you a new commandment. Love one another as I have loved you, so you also should love one another. This is how we will know that you are my disciples, if you have loved one another. Jesus showed us how to love. He kept his promises, lived by the virtues, took care of his family and friends, and treated all people with respect. These 4 things are going to be on your test. Your test is going to ask you, how did Jesus show love for others? And what can we do to do as Jesus did? That is a very important section. He listened to people and cared for their needs. Even when he was tired, he stood up for the rights of others and helped them to find peace and comfort. He continued to love his disciples even when they were too afraid to return that love. Jesus is our example of unconditional love. When we practice the virtues of love or charity, we love as Jesus did. Unconditional love does not depend on our actions. I'm going to highlight that as well. Unconditional love does not depend on our actions. Conditional, just to explain that, conditional love means if we do something, then we will be loved. If we do this, then they will love us. If we do that, then he will love us. If we do this, then she will love us. Unconditional love is a love that comes without condition. There is nothing that you can do to make God not love you. Let's continue reading. It is a love that continues no matter what we do or fail to do. It is a love that is shown even when it is not returned. So these 2 pages deal with love. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the 2 pictures on this page. I'm looking at the picture up top with the family that is showing love to one another. I'm looking at the picture down at the bottom, what looks like a Grammy with her grandkids or whatever, showing love for one another. Interestingly enough, up until the coronavirus took place, I really didn't give these pictures a whole lot of thought. I see that it's families enjoying each other's company. But now that we're kind of socially isolated and quarantined from each other, I think these pictures take on a little bit more meaning. Gathering with our family, not just our immediate family, but our extended family. Gathering with our friends, sitting at table, breaking bread, eating with them, kind of takes on a new meaning now, doesn't it? It's a form of love. Sitting and enjoying each other's company is a form of love. Showing that love is something that each and every one of you do on a daily basis. When you be kind, when you're nice, when you're courteous, when you're respectful to each other, you're showing love. Why are you showing love? Because we're able to love God and one another because of that virtue of love. Okay? All right, that ends this lesson. Tomorrow we're going to talk about people that have used these theological virtues of faith, hope, and love in their lives to become very, very close to God and to become saints. Tomorrow we're going to learn about some saints, what a saint is, and why each and every one of you is part of the communion of saints. You are a saint. God made you holy. You are a saint. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. God bless, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow.